first of all, I thought it was really, really interesting to hear all perspectives. My main takeaways would be that, as a group, we're really already embracing a lot of change. So I heard, to my surprise, a lot more people that are experimenting, setting up A/B testing, which I think is honestly what we should all do. I think we'll get to a point where we will, as probably a collective, need to set some rules on how to use certain of these AI techniques. For example, we talked in my group a lot about synthetic data, but then how many synthetic data do you need, sample size-wise? What kind of profile or structure do you give it? So there's many new methodological questions, which we're all still learning a lot about. And I think to the key of transparency among each other, but definitely towards our clients, that's going to be key. And I think maybe my other conclusion would be that maybe paradoxically, I don't know if that's a word, but we're talking here about robots, AI, machines, but probably where the role and the future lays is more in the human. So maybe humanizing data, using systems in the right ways, taking a point of view, adding real human deep data to train future data on. So I think there's something really interesting there.
Melanie.
Building on, is this on? Yeah, good. Building on what she said, I think from our table, I asked everybody this question too, so this is sort of from them as well. There's a real desire to make sure that we get much better at curating beautiful data, because all the problems that we have in our data now are going to be much amplified if we don't figure it out and we lay artificial intelligence and tools on top of that. And then I was really amazed at how much people are already doing, so that's great. But then also really excited that everybody still sees the importance of wrapping humans around it.
Tony.
A lot of really great learning. It's super interesting to see how aligned actually a lot of the presentations were this morning in terms of what are the key opportunities, risks, and so on. In answering this, I'm a little bit biased by the conversation we were just in. What does the future look like? What are the skills required, and so on? And really interesting. And on the one hand, as ever with these things, frightening with what skills are we going to lose? Are people going to have roles in the jobs in the future? And some of those fears. On the other side, actually, what this opens up for us in the being able to bring more and better insights, but also for us to be able to move up the spectrum and to, instead of being focused so much all the time on answering questions, being more focused on asking the right questions. Was a lot of discussion that we had on our table, and about how we make sure that all of the great answers and information and insights that we get is really leading to impact on the business. So yeah, really multiplying our chances to get insight and then make it have the impact.
And Ted?
We were talking about data provenance, and we spent a lot of time. What's interesting about getting rid of ad fraud is, and I spent a fair amount of time in my prior life doing fraud and risk fraud for financial services, and the key question is how much friction do you put on or not put on? And you don't want to chill panelists from answering questions, because at the heart of what we do, we need panelists to answer questions. But if you put a little friction on, you can figure out who the fraudsters are. And so, getting that balance right, tied with getting the actual questionnaires right, making it easier for consumers. So I think there's the double-edged sword is how do we prevent fraud? And often you have to put a little friction in. But how do we make it easier for people to answer questions who aren't, fake bots or in the wrong country? So how do we get that balance right?
Great. Two takeaways, really. One from lunch and one from the table that I was in. From lunch, one of the things that kept cropping up was the phrase, at the moment. So AI can't do this at the moment. Synthetic data won't do this at the moment. And at the moment is probably 3 to 9 months. Most things are going to change over the next 3 months, 9 months. There's going to be very, very little static within that. And then we were talking about the evolution of research methodologies, and the question that probably stimulated for me, the most interesting outcomes was when we asked the people from the client side, what can't you do at the moment that you would like to be able to do? So one of the things that cropped up was competitor analysis. And I think that when we're looking at AI, asking these questions about what can't we do right now is a useful part of the picture, rather than how do we get efficiencies, which is great, and how can we make this work faster and cheaper. Those are all good, but trying to look at things that we can't even do at the moment, I think is really quite interesting. So we'll go the other way down the line, starting with Ted. And what should the trade associations, Insights Association, Esomar, MRS, what should the trade associations be doing over the next year or two?
That's a great question. I would say is helping the industry understand what the opportunities are for AI, but also what the risks are. And I think often we swing the pendulum too much on the risk, and then that chills innovation and adoption. I like what Tony, your approach at Heineken, how you're sort of crawl, walk, run, and figuring out how to do that. So the risks are apparent, and I'm sure way back when we started doing surveys on the internet, people were saying there's huge risks to doing that. So I think it's helping the industry with the risk, but also really identifying the opportunities, because I do think having come from other markets, like I said, financial risk and fraud, or I know a little bit about ad tech, I think market research is probably not on the forefront of innovation, and I think this is our moment to be on the forefront of innovation. So,
great, Tony.
Yeah, again, reflecting on the conversation we had at the table discussion as well. As we've spoken a lot about this being a true inflection point for the industry, super exciting. I think there is still huge risk, not just the compliance risks and data and all of those things that we talked about. There's a huge risk of others who are much more well-established, other big organizations, the likes of Microsoft and Google, who are heavily embedded into the technology stacks of big organizations, eating your lunch. And as to what can Esomar and MRS do, the sooner that we move from, and we're discussing it on our table as well, the sooner we move from a set of questions, which is a great start, and we need to do that properly, but getting a code out there that means that you can be trusted, and we can, in the same way we have a research ethics code that means that we can outsource and work with agency partners, the more we're going to be able to bring you in to client organizations. When that doesn't happen, when each of you are individually fighting and come up with your own standards and proving that you're better and competing against each other in this room, then you're going to be beaten by the much bigger fish that are out there. And I think this is the role that Esomar and MRS can play, is treating it as an industry issue and solving it together.
Melanie and Insights Association. All right.
Okay, apparently I'm going first. So for me, there's two things, Ray. It's trust. So I think one of the questions we really kept on coming back on is, how can we trust the results? And what needs to happen, like what are guidelines, like new methodologies to make sure we can trust the results. So I think regulating, stimulating debate, maybe educating on how to do this in the right way and what methodologies to apply. I think that's one. And second one, a little bit to your point, Tony. I think related to education and the role of CMI in companies versus other jobs. So I think, many other departments will just come around with AI tools, tools that, you can easily just get some qualitative feedback on. And, just giving, I would say, maybe toolkits, maybe ways in which they can help to educate their organizations on when to use things in what way. I think that's going to be really important.
Yes, well, so as an association, I thought I'd let them go
Yes.
first. But I'm hearing the same thing, help them understand risks, help them with standards, not just questions, help them with, but also inspiring. So where I'm hearing that they want us to give them actual case studies and help them figure out how it's actually being implemented and inspire them in ways to evolve their business so that they're not obsolete in a year.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to throw it open to the floor. So be thinking about if you've got a question you want to add. But I'm going to ask one that I was asked already a couple of times today. If I'm not already doing anything in AI, how should I start? So, Melanie, do you want to go first? Then Annelies, Tony, Ted.
Well, the very best place to start, I think, is just to start personally, to go out to some of the AI tools that are out there. Spend half an hour a day just asking it questions and getting to know it. Literally teach yourself how to use it, how to prompt it. Do simple things like have it write you a story for introducing Ray in front of the crowd, or look at things in your refrigerator and like if you've only got 7 ingredients, ask it to give you a recipe. If you've got a birthday party coming up, have it suggest birthday gifts for you. But spend actual time with it every day for a few minutes a day, even if it's just 10 minutes a day. And then in your business, I would start by saying, okay, where are there some needs that our clients have that we're not solving yet, and how might AI be a potential solution to solve some of those problems for them, and then go through the 4 R's and start sort of planning for it. But I'd start from what are our clients need that I can't deliver today, and because that'll help you with the USP and help your business, and then apply the 6 R's of how to do that with managing risk and reputation and all of those.
Annelies.
That was a really good answer. I was also going to say, I think you need to start embedding it in your habits. So I think it's really easy for yourself, but also for your organization to say, hey, AI is here. You have to just go and start using it. I think it's just, another tool. So it's really about looking how can it just fit into habits, patterns, things people are already doing. So it makes it easy to do. And I think second of all, also, it's like with every new technology, it's only as useful as the need it is, fulfilling. So I would say understanding your clients well, understanding what needs they have, and then think if AI can be a solution or potentially other solutions as well. So I think it's really applying what we also say to our clients. Start with the insight and the needs, know the technology, what it can do, but start with, what problem it's supposed to solve.
And Tony, to narrow it, for those clients out there, how should they set about starting?
Yeah, and I hopefully gave a hint as to how we did in Heineken, but how I would generalize that is say, I think if you sign up to be at this conference here today, you're probably not the audience for this question, because you're somebody who has experimented or is concerned enough or interested enough that you're into it. And I think in every organization there are, as we saw earlier on, those laggards who are frightened, don't know where to start, etc. Creating that safe fun, and I think fun is as important as safe, way to start experimenting and playing. I think there's some great examples of how you can do it in personal life. But as we did, setting it up as a team build experience with a mix of people across functions, different levels of having experienced and played with AI before, suddenly the people who were, I don't want to go near this is dangerous, this is all wrong, creating it in that safe environment and a fun team building, a bit of competition, everyone embraced it, and then started getting some of those early learnings of what works and that feel for what it can do and what it can't do, because it was as interesting for everybody seeing the stupid things it threw up, so that they can go, okay, it's not the be all and end all either, and it does make mistakes, and I do still have a role to play, and that learning cycle can begin. But so my big thing is create a safe environment, but also a fun way for people to get involved.
And Ted?
One of the things we're doing is just doing head-to-head tests. So we'll have ChatGPT write a summary of a ad, creative testing of an ad campaign, and then we'll have someone on our team write it, and it just gives you a very tangible understanding of what it can achieve and what it can't achieve, and And I think the other, and obviously that's a big political question because you're thinking about, can you replace humans with machines? So you've got to kind of give people the context. And, at our company, we hire 5,000 people a year. So we're not looking to take down a lot of people. We're looking not to hire 4,000 people next year, whatever the number is. So give people the context, but do that. And it was funny because a lot of, the GPT didn't do this well or didn't do that well. But what we don't capture in those tests are the human errors that's happened, in the past and over years. So you have to remember, like, part of this is should help you take human error out of the system too.
While he's distracted, if I could add one more thing, and that's if you haven't started with it yet, you might also start by doing a data inventory within your company. What data do you own? What data do you have permission to use? And start thinking about how to structure that data in a way that a tool could be laid on top of it. Looking at the data from, what does it represent? What does it not represent? What would be a good use for that data? So you could really start by doing a data strategy, because it's going to be contingent on having a really good data set that sits underneath it. If you're good.
Fantastic. So, what questions do we have for the panel? We have one at the back.
Thanks. Question about synthetic data and synthetic respondents. What sort of surveys and topics do you think are more suitable for incorporating synthetic respondents, and what types do you think are least or completely unsuitable, if any?
I can do an attempt. So I don't have that many experience with the quant side of things. I've been doing more research on the qualitative side. But my experience is that whenever it's more maybe about tactical research that's maybe less on new things, maybe less on the emerging, but more on, kind of further building on existing concepts, that's where it's going to be much better, because there's lots more data available to actually get to a reliable conclusion. But to be fair, I do think that more experimentation would be needed to kind of validate that. I think also, by the way, country. So what we do see, and I think I'm not the only one, is quite a bias towards US data at the moment. I think it might change. But that's another one to take into account if you think about, kinds of studies, kinds of markets as well,
We have done a lot of testing of synthetic data, and it is missing out on the nuances and context. So, our view is it will be a hybrid where you'll actually have humans, and then you'll use in some synthetic or probabilistic modeling, to fill out gaps or places where you don't have quite the fidelity you want. But when you look at synthetic, humans are emotional, they change, things aren't always black and white. And when you look at synthetic panels, you lose a lot of that. And so, right now, we don't think as a standalone synthetic panels will give you the right answers as an augmenter, as augmentation towards your human panels. I think it can be highly effective.
Yeah, and I think I agree with everything that's said, and I think it's, when you're thinking about modeling, there's the concepts of interpolation versus extrapolation. If you're testing something that's within the parameters of what you've tested a million times before, I'm very comfortable to use synthetic data as a way to, and synthetic panels because they'll be really representative of what I'm testing now. If it's a new spot within an existing campaign, a regular lager pills that we're testing, it's probably going to be okay. The further you get away from what you've tested very often before, the less good the synthetic panel is going to be.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Or opinions? We can take an opinion if somebody wants to highlight something. Yes.
I have a question. and it's kind of an opinion. I've heard from a lot of so I held or managed, sort of, whatever you want to call it, 2 of the panel discussions, and it was on qualitative, AI and qualitative, and it came up a couple of times in those discussions, but I've also heard it around the room a couple of times and just around the industry in general, that we should stop calling it AI. We should stop calling it artificial intelligence, because for some reason the intelligence piece doesn't always sit right. It isn't an intelligent thing. It's not doing that foresight. It's not necessarily proactive, although we did hear from the keynote speaker this morning that there are some advancements being made. Just wondering from the panelists, do any of you have any ideas on what do you feel like could be a more appropriate way to refer to whether it's generative or predictive tools that we're using now?
Well, I'll let them think about that, and I'll start from a perspective of legislation and governance. It's actually going to be really important that we have a strong, consistent language and that we label things properly, because governance is coming, and if we call something AI, it's going to fall under AI governance and legislation. So right now we're a little sloppy with the term. We call all sorts of things AI, and if we're not careful with that approach, when AI comes out, the whole industry will be scooped up and suddenly regulated. Everything from regression analysis to automation and algorithms that sit in routers that aren't regulated today will all of a sudden be regulated because we refer to them as AI. So it's a slightly different take on the question, but it's a really important point that we're going to have to agree on some terminology and get really specific about calling things what they are, similar to the fraud conversation, the data quality conversation. We, as language specialists, are going to have to, in this area and in the area of data quality, get much more precise in the language we use to describe so that we can solve the right problems and so that we don't end up over-legislating.
So from a European perspective, as I understand it, I think Judith is in the room more in touch with this, the definition the EU is using is that anything where an algorithm makes the decision is AI. So your cluster analysis is going to come under the European legislation, for example. If you have a predictive regression model that allocates people into categories, that will be covered as AI. So picking up on Melanie's point, but actually saying that this horse is well out of that stable. This is all going to be AI in its broadest possible sense. And I would also urge people to move away from trying to give special names to their systems. And I can think of a couple of vendors out there who are pretending that everybody else's synthetic data is fake data and theirs is real synthetic data, and this sort of stuff, because I don't think that helps, and that is playing the name game, I think, that Melanie was talking about, that leads to confusion. So I would stick to the generic AI. If you have a specific technique, like you're using prescriptive analytics versus predictive analytics, fine, but then make sure that you actually know what you're talking about and you're using the right definition.
Well, and in governance, like it's going to be very clear that if you're using AI as they've described it, that you have to be transparent about it. So if you give it a different name, you're still going to have to call it AI and let people know that you're using AI, because that's going to be part of the legislation.
Just build things. And fully agree, Nikki. I think it's a really important point, and agree, and we could agree, maybe it's augmented information because it's not really insight at the moment. But I think internally in a lot of organizations, and we touched on this a bit earlier as well, as someone said, I think it was you, Annelies, was saying, there are other departments and functions out there who are going and saying, hey, we've got some fantastic AI-powered solutions, and we're getting, in client side, literally hundreds of emails a day. And trust me, our CEOs and CMOs are all getting these messages saying, we've got fantastic AI-powered solutions. We're having to compete, and a lot of what we're doing, a lot of the videos that you see and so on, are trying to make sure that we stay relevant internally and people don't think we're falling behind and the laggards who are using the old dated tools that you used 25 years ago. Because that's a perception internally in companies when you've got organizations going up and saying, hey, your insights department is so outdated, they're not using the latest. Let us show you what we can do instead. So on the one hand, yes, amongst ourselves, we may want to to classify and think of them differently and scale at different levels, understand that internally we're competing to make sure that we stay relevant, and that there are the snake oil salespeople out there, and there are out there, are not getting a march on us. So we have to make sure that we're playing the game as well to some degree, but doing it in the right way.
I'm going to chip in with another thought as well that we need to take away from today. We've heard 2 or 3 times now from the panel, we heard it early in the day, how American most of the analysis is at the moment. ChatGPT is predominantly learned from the English language. More than 50% of the material accessible on the web is in English. The majority of that is American. So it would be really interesting and helpful for all of us. We had 2 colleagues here today from marketing in Japan, Chinai from China, from Tunisia over there. It'd be really useful to hear the different perspectives of what's working and what's not working from different marketplaces. And my colleagues in the Legal Affairs Committee would be really keen to know what is different in the legislation in those different markets as well, because historically a lot of legislation started in the EU and then evolved outwards. That may not be the pattern this time. As Claudio showed this morning, there are new laws cropping up right around the world, and collectively we need to keep an eye on where those changes are going and what is happening. So any closing comments on that theme?
Well, I'll just say that in the U.S. it's not as wonderful as it sounds either, though, right? The U.S. is a really big, complicated country, very, very diverse. And while a lot of that information is available in English, they're not capturing the microcultures of society, and they're not capturing how fast society is changing yet. And at the moment, maybe they will, but it's not. I mean, it's a very complicated culture in the U.S., and it's not. The data that comes out does not reflect the complexity of society.
And I know that Sharon Danzy and her group are going to be presenting stuff at the CRC about how some of this impacts in terms of Black Americans not being captured.
Maybe if I can add to that, I think culture is a really... Timisoara culture. Yeah, also interesting probably to see what that gives. No, I think culture is a really important element in the whole debate, and not also the idea that culture is not something static. Models are evolving, and yes, of course, we'll have new models, and probably they will come out more rapidly. But is it really reflecting, the culture and how culture is changing? I think there's going to be like a big role in just also probably feeding those kind of systems in the future with new data on cultures and how that is evolving. So I think it's not just language or region. I think culture is probably a lot at the essence of what we're going to be looking at.
I can jump in as an American who moved to London a couple of years ago. I think the complex thing about the U.S. is Melanie says is all the different cultures, but the other thing is just such a big market, and because it's such a big and I didn't get until I moved to the UK, I didn't get a real sense how big the market is, but because it's such a big market, it just drives a lot of the innovation. It drives a lot of the standardization. So, my assumption, if you look at, OpenAI, DeepMind, Meta's new AI, I think a lot of it's going to be driven out of the U.S. because the dollars are there, the venture capital dollars are there, and the market's so big. So, our job is to try to figure out how to then adapt that to broader cultures.
Nothing huge to add on this particular topic. I think I agree with everything that's been said. I think it's been covered well. I guess, is it closing comments as well, or?
No. Well, no? Yes, but not from us.
Okay.
There's a gentleman at the back who is mic'd and is about to do the closing comments. Yes.
Okay. You want me to close? Okay.
Well, you can ask it later.
I had a question for them as well, if there is time, which is, I'm reading lately that artificial intelligence will leverage levels, in the sense that it's not going to be the best that will benefit most, but the ones in the average or medium level, both individuals and companies. What do you think about that? Because we had this discussion in one of our tables.
Yeah, we had that discussion as well on our table, and indeed, I think that's absolutely right. I think a lot of work that, and we were talking about it more in terms of levels within an organisation.
Yep.
And I think that a lot of the power this can bring is to automate a lot of work that's done at mid levels. What we talked about a lot in our discussion was around what does that mean for the future? Because how do people develop the skills if there's not middle management roles for people to develop and grow? That we're going to need different paths for people to become more experienced and ready to take on bigger, more impactful roles over time. So yes, I think that's probably more right than wrong. And the big question is, what are the implications of that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to like the lower level or more automational jobs, I think you're right. What we do expect is actually that it will challenge us all to become more human. So, for example, to become a better consultant, somebody that really can contextualize insights and analyze them in a better way. Become maybe a better modeler or prompt engineer. You know, there's so many models out there. How do you make the choice? Which model is appropriate for which kind of use case? So I think it's in a way going to maybe take away some of the more repetitive jobs, but at the same time it's going to, I think, open up different kind of roles, also at more junior levels, hopefully, and career paths. So.
Yeah, that's what I was going to. Sorry, that's what I was going to say. I don't think that the middle will go away. I think that the roles will change. I think that the skills will change. I think they'll have to be better, and you're still going to need people, and you're still going to need, because what we're finding is, at least in the short term, at least for now, you're still going to need people to help with the prompts, to help with the data. We're all going to have to get much better at data structure and understanding data, even in our world, than we are today. And so, you know, people who really understand data can stack data, can interpret data, can query data, and then can generate insights, and then can verify those insights, validate those insights. I just think that the roles are going to change. And those are all the roles that'll make a great new leader, too, and teaching their people how to do all those things. So I think the whole skill set up and down is going to be different here.
Yeah, when I look at, and I came from a company in the States that was a very sophisticated digital and data and analytics platform, but we still had a lot of people we needed to help clients with the setup and help clients with the interpretation of the data and adjusting the models. So I don't see a world where clients are paying you, you know, 10, 20, 30 $million for our insights where we just hand them over a platform and give them a login and say best of luck. So I do think, you know, there will always be servicing. I think the other thing, you know, when we look at the churn in our business, and I talked about we have to hire 5,000 people a year, a lot of it is around those very mundane tasks. So if you look at some of our centers in India that are doing very repetitive work that can be done, you know, through AI or machine learning, we've got churn like 30, 40%. So it's not like these are jobs that people are really excited about or rewarded from. So now those people are going to have to be cross-trained and learn to be, you know, technical advisors or solutions engineers. But I think the first things to be automated are going to be things where people voluntarily choose to leave because they're not very rewarding careers. So.